So today we're talking about different types of fiction. And in our unit text structure, we've been talking about examining genre. And a type of genre is fiction, but fiction also has a lot of different subcategories. And so today we're going to talk about the different subcategories of genre, the genre of fiction. Genre is the type or style of writing used in a text. And one major form of genre is fiction. If a text is fiction, it means that it's a work of the imagination. The events in the text are made up. They didn't really happen. The characters in the text are also made up. They don't exist in real life. Most fiction writings are narrative. This means the story is told through the use of a narrator. There are many different types of fiction genres. You may already know some that are used in many classrooms. Myths, fairy tales, and fables are fiction genres. Myths are very old stories. They have gods and goddesses in them who talk to or visit humans on Earth. Zeus, Athena, Nike, and Hades are popular gods and goddesses from Greek myths. Odin, Thor, and Loki are popular gods from Norse myths. Fairy tales are also very old stories. They have magical or imaginary creatures and events in them. They often begin with the phrase once upon a time. Some of the most well-known fairy tales today were published in the 1800s. They were published by brothers Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. And these include Cinderella, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, and Hansel and Gretel. Fables usually have talking animals in them. And fables are often used to teach a lesson, or they might explain how an event happened. An ancient writer named Aesop wrote many fables more than 2,500 years ago. There are many other types of fiction genres. One is science fiction. Science fiction tells stories about science and technology. They often take place in the future. They can also have robots, space travel, or aliens in them. Here's an example of the science fiction. The bus pulled up to the curb. Pablo found a seat and closed his eyes. A skinny teen moved closer to Pablo. I'm not from this planet. I've always wanted to see what Earth was like. Pablo rolled his eyes. So you're an alien on vacation, huh? You're crazy. Get away from me. Pablo reached for his book bag. But all of a sudden, his book bag began to float. It rose up into the air. It gently landed on his lap. Pablo could not believe what he had just seen. He looked at the alien. Do you still think I'm crazy? The alien asked. Another type of mystery and is detective fiction. Detective fiction. Mystery and detective fiction stories of some kind of puzzle or crime in them that needs to be solved. Here's an example of mystery and detective fiction. The next morning, Kyle went to get his bike. As he opened the garage door, he could tell something was wrong. The old window in the corner was broken, and the place where he had parked his bike was empty. Someone had stolen his bike. Kyle's mind raced. He always locked his bike, even in the garage. Whoever took his bike must have had a key. There were only two other people who knew where he kept both his bike and the extra key to the lock. At least Kyle knew where to start looking. Historical fiction is set in the past. The story takes place during a time, frame, or event that really happened. It might also include famous people from history. Here's an example of historical fiction. The gentleman who had asked for breakfast thanked Betsy for it. The milk you provided to us, he said, was the best I've had in many a day, and the cornbread was delicious. Thank you for being so kind. Now I must say goodbye and go on with my journey. Goodbye, sir, said Betsy, curtsying. But when will I get to see General Washington? Eagerly she raised her eyes to meet those of the kindly stranger. With a smile, he answered, I am General Washington. Another type of fiction is called fantasy fiction. Fantasy fiction usually has a mix of humans and monsters in it. It might also have magical beings or ghosts in it. The events that happen in fantasy fiction cannot happen in real life. Here's an example of fantasy fiction. The trouble with Harleby Hall was that it was haunted. The ghost that appeared in the guest bedroom every Christmas Eve made the most of each visit. I was not happy with simply frightening the person in the spare bedroom for a moment or two. Instead, the figure remained there for an entire hour before it would disappear. It proved most troublesome in another way as well, for the ghost of Harrowby Hall was a soaking, dripping water witch. Realistic fiction, the most difficult kind of fiction to figure out. This is because realistic fiction, well, real. It has no magic or monsters or aliens in it. The characters are regular people. The events or problems of the story could actually happen in real life, but it's important to remember that it's still a made-up story. Here's an example of realistic fiction. Really? A bunkhouse? We're going to sleep here? Haley asked. It doesn't even have a TV. How boring. She threw her bag on the bunk. We are in the middle of nowhere. This is a ranch, said Haley's brother Brian. We're supposed to be in the middle of nowhere. This vacation is supposed to be fun, her father said. A nice break from city life. Once you see the horses, I bet you'll love it here. Horses are boring, Haley said. The whole place is boring. They don't even have an internet. So these types of paragraphs and things that we read were different types of fiction. And today you're going to read some paragraphs and identify for me what type of fiction it is or what makes it the type of fiction that it has in the question. So you're going to read the paragraph carefully and answer the question that follows, explaining why, like in this particular example, in number one, while the above is an example of a fable. So you have to remember what I said about fable. Fable meaning usually it's birds or animals that talk that are trying to get across a point or teach a lesson. So read these paragraphs and try to figure out what type of fiction that you're reading. If you have any questions, click over to the Zoom. I'll be happy to answer any questions for you.